businesses become more successful by helping them grow with programming like this webinar today, as well as connect and also influencing public policy to ensure Calgary is a great place to do business. While I've only been at the Chamber for 4.5 years of its 125, we have seen a ton of change in my time, both as an organization and as a team. And like so many organizations, especially in Calgary these days, along the way, we have definitely dealt with the challenges of finding a great fit and keeping a high-performance team together when we manage to build it. We are thankful to have a great and stable team currently, but always looking for ways to ensure retention and satisfaction of our staff. So we're very happy to partner with Hayes today on this webinar. Hayes is a committed member of the Calgary Chamber of Commerce and a very respected member of the HR community. So I want to thank them for their continued support as well as delivering this great topic today. And for all you attending, very much look forward to your feedback about webinars like this and if you'd like to see more of them. So with that, I will hand it over to Jim.
Thanks, Aaron. Thanks, Caitlin. Good afternoon, everyone. As they said, my name is Jim Fearon. I'm VP for Hayes Specialist Recruitment in Western Canada. I'm based here in Calgary, but responsible for our businesses in Vancouver, Edmonton, and Winnipeg as well. I've worked in recruitment for 18 years, all of which has been spent working for Hayes. And I've been lucky enough to work for Hayes in England, Australia, and obviously here in Canada over that time. I spent the vast majority of my career recruiting in technical disciplines such as construction, mining, and oil and gas, although I'm responsible for all of Hayes' business lines in Western Canada. Now, I'm conscious that some of you may be very familiar with Hayes, but also that many of you may not be so familiar, so I wanted to give you a brief overview of our organisation to start off with. Hayes has been in operation since 1958. We're headquartered in the UK and have operations in 240 offices across 33 countries and employ nearly 9,000 staff. We operate 20 specialist divisions, and last year we placed 61,000 people into permanent jobs and more than 200,000 into temporary or contract assignments around the world, and we're currently ranked as the world's largest specialist recruitment company. In Calgary, we operate our accounting and finance, construction and property, IT, human resources, office professionals, and oil and gas divisions, and provide permanent, temporary, and contract recruitment services. Now, we believe that our position in recruitment gives us a fairly unique perspective on the world of work. So outside of our everyday job of recruitment, we strive to provide or produce a high volume of guides, reports, and white papers to enable our customers to get a better understanding of many of the key challenges they face in terms of recruitment and retention. These include things like our annual salary guides, the Hayes Journal, which is a biannual publication focused at key HR topics, and the DNA series, which we produced last year and analysed the career paths of hundreds of C-suite executives in all sorts of disciplines and industries, such as CFOs, CIOs, and VPs of construction. The content of today's presentation is based on our latest report. It's the first in a series of 3 called the FIT series. Let me explain a little bit about it and why we decided to produce it. So every year, as part of our annual salary guide, we ask questions about recruitment and retention, and every year when we ask the question, what are the reasons that people that you've hired didn't work out, the number one reason that comes through is fit, and we've seen the same thing every year for the past 5 years. So we decided we wanted to try and get to the bottom of what fit actually means and whether we could help both employers and employees or candidates make better hiring and career decisions. So we carried out a survey to which we had more than 2,500 respondents. Half of the respondents identified themselves as people managers or hiring managers, and the rest were employees. I guess, in fact, everyone was actually an employee. We feel we got a really good cross-section of Canadian working life. So people range from 20 to 60 years of age. They came from 16 industry sectors, 10 provinces, and 20 functional areas. Their employers include small, medium, and large organizations, and they range from entry-level people to C-suite executives. So as I said, it's a really good cross-section. We took all the results, we analyzed them and gave them an explanation, and we tried to turn them into something that was easily understandable. We've separated the findings into 3 separate reports, as you can see here. So part 1, fit and recruitment, how fit impacts recruitment. Part 2, excuse me, fit and satisfaction, the impact of fit on workplace happiness and retention, where we actually found that almost 50% of Canadians are unhappy in their jobs, if you can believe that. Part 3, fit and values, the impact of people and culture on your documented corporate fit. So the difference between what you say your corporate values are and how people actually fit into an organisation. So we launched part 1 a few months ago, and that's what I'm actually going to be talking to you about today. So I'm going to cut to the chase and start with the key findings, and then I'll try and explain them as we go through the presentation. So the number one reason an employee doesn't work out is a result of not being a fit, and the biggest reason for that is that there's a disconnect with their hiring manager. Nearly all professionals say understanding your own ideal fit is essential to achieving career goals, yet a significant number would forgo a good fit for more money or career progression. A poor fit rarely works out well for employer or employee. Social behaviour is the biggest contributor to fit working or not, and I'll explain what I mean by social behaviour more later on. And employers and candidates definitely try to assess fit, but the assessment is flawed. Now, before we could create our survey, we first had to create a framework that helped define fit. It's very common to hear that things don't work out due to fit, but I don't think there's an agreed meaning or definition for it. So the proof of that was really in the pudding, because when we sat down and started the process, we really struggled to define fit, and it actually took a lot of time, research, and a fair few heated debates to come to a conclusion. So I'd like to take you through a brief overview of how we developed our framework and definition. So basically, we started out by asking ourselves what we or people mean when a job or employee doesn't work out because he, she, or it just wasn't a fit. And you hear that an awful lot. So we explored the answer to the question, in what way didn't they fit, which I actually think doesn't get asked enough. So we discovered there are a myriad of different responses, and these are really just a few. So they didn't work out because there were cultural differences, or his communication style wasn't right, or she didn't work well with the team. You may have said some of these yourself. I can honestly say I've said quite a few of them over the years. Now, I think I learned from these things, or we learned from these things, but let's say, for example, I hire Billy, and Billy doesn't work out, and I say, Billy didn't fit because he was just too confrontational. I then make a conscious effort to watch out for that characteristics in my next hire or my next few hires. But I've definitely found myself over the years in the situation where I've hired somebody that hasn't worked out, and I find myself comparing them to somebody else that didn't work out previously for similar reasons, and I wonder how on earth I managed to make the same mistake again. My problem is that with each person that doesn't work out because of fit, it's usually for different reasons, but I remember the more recent events and tend to forget what fit issues I had 4 or 5 failed hires ago. So I'm not really managing the information that I have in any memorable or effective way, and I think that's fairly common. The other problem is that we seem to have come to terms with the fact that often people simply just don't fit. It's almost as though that's an acceptable reason for things to not to work out. And now maybe that statement's true, and maybe it's not. But what we did was we added as many fit reasons as we possibly could to the list so that it was pretty well exhaustive. And then we said, is it possible to categorize these in a more manageable way? And we concluded that the vast majority of reasons could fall into one of 4 categories, and they are work ethic, social behaviour, conformity, and then team versus individual. Now that's great, but on its own, the categories don't really help substantially, so we had to put some sort of meaningful definition to each and provide a scale to measure it. So let me explain how we did that. The important thing about these scales is not where you rate yourself as an employee or employer or, in fact, your team. What we're trying to do is work out what you want so that you can get a match. So I'll start with work ethic. So this is about the level of passion, drive, and ambition being a match. On one end of the scale, you have the person who scores a 10. They work 12 hours a day, every day, and they're basically a workaholic. At the other end of the scale, you've got the person who literally just turns up to work to get a paycheck and has no passion or ambition at all. Social behaviour we've defined as how people behave and interact with each other at work. It's not exclusively about how they behave at a social event, although that's definitely a big part of it. It's really how they behave in general. A scale on this that seems to work is trying to say, where do I fit on the scale of casual versus informal? So in your organisation, do people dress casually and sit on beanbags? And if so, then the person who joins your company who's very formal, they wear a suit and tie, they send very formal sounding emails, probably isn't going to fit in or is going to feel significantly out of place. On conformity, this is a measurement of how much you want your employee to follow the rules or to figure it out for themselves. So you may want someone with initiative, because I think we all say that, but then on reflection, you may get frustrated or annoyed when people are constantly trying to reinvent the wheel or stick to tried and tested means. So are they very inflexible on this scale or very accepting? And finally, team versus individual. So are you looking for a person who likes working in an environment that's heavy on collaboration to get results, or do you want someone that likes to work completely autonomously. Now, we think that virtually all fit-related reasons can be dropped into one of these 4 categories, although there must be some that don't or that we didn't think of. Having said that, if this covers at least 90% of the reasons, we think it's a pretty good step towards getting a grip on something as important as fit. Now, just for fun, let me put this into a real-life example for you using myself as a case study. The point here isn't really what I look for when I'm hiring. It's just to illustrate how you can bring this concept to life for yourself, either as a hiring manager or a job seeker. And obviously, I hire people to work with me directly. I've been in recruitment, as I said, for 18 years. And I think I have a pretty good feel for what sort of fit will work for me and what won't. But having said that, I still get it wrong often enough, sad to say. But instead of feeling like I know what I want, it would appear to be very beneficial to try and quantify and document exactly what I am looking for. So let's give it a go. I'll start out with work ethic match. And I'd say I want to find somebody that has a well above average work ethic. I want to hire somebody that's passionate about their work and achieving both their own goals and objectives as well as those of the business. I don't want somebody that's going to clock in or out or just get their work done. Equally, it's not important to me to hire somebody that's a 9 or a 10. I don't need workaholics, but I do want somebody that's going to be prepared to go above and beyond when needed. So I'd say I'm looking for an 8 on this. On conformity, I want a blend of flexibility and conformity, so I want to hire somebody that will accept and fit in with the overall plan and how we're trying to achieve it. I don't want somebody who's going to completely disagree with everything and try to do things in obscure ways, but at the same time, I do want people that have come up with their own ideas because I want the business to develop and to grow. So I'd say I'm close to the middle here, and I'd put it as a 6. Next is social behaviour, and I'm looking for somebody that has a sense of humour, is fun to work with, is good fun on a work social event, but at the same time knows where the boundaries lie. So I've put this at the midpoint and given it a 5. Then, from a team versus individual match, this is very important for me. They have to be a self-starter and able to work independently. I don't like having to manage people too closely, but they also have to be able to recognise that we work closely as a team and that each individual team's action can impact everyone else, so I've rated that as a 7. There's an interesting point to make here between work ethic match and social behaviour. I think what I'm really looking for is that somebody that, from a work ethic perspective, takes their work very seriously, works very hard, but I don't necessarily want them to take themselves too seriously, if that makes sense. I want somebody that can have a bit of fun whilst they're doing it. Anyway, nobody actually cares what I'm looking for, and the point is to go through that exercise and really challenge yourself and say, have I really defined what I'm looking for? Do I really understand the type of person that's going to fit in with me and my team? And if you haven't, that could be the beginning of identifying and then fixing the problem. Okay, so now that we've produced a framework that enabled us to define fit per se, or at least our version of it, we produced a survey, sent it out to see what employers and employees in the Canadian market had to say about fit. Before we go into the nitty-gritty, let's try and take a quick look at the size of the problem and if fit actually does matter. So out of all the people we surveyed, we first wanted to know if people feel as though they fit in at their current job. And 2/3 of Canadians said they don't fit in with their current team, which is pretty shocking, really, if you can believe that. And 2/3 of them also say they don't fit with their organisation's defined fit, which could be their defined values or culture. For the purposes of this presentation, I wanted to see what the Albertan respondents had said, and 70% of them don't feel they fit in with their current working team, so actually higher than the national average, and 66% said they don't fit in with their organisation's defined fit, so on par with the average. And this is interesting. So a company's defined fit is really what the senior leadership team want for the tone of the company overall. But as employers and hiring managers, we need to understand the subtle differences between organisational culture versus the culture or fit of a smaller team. So, for example, we have a defined fit for Hayes overall, but within Hayes we have a huge variety of different populations. We're a sales organisation. We have a very clear office culture we want for our sales staff. But if you were to go from one office to the next, you'd find there's a different subculture or fit within each office. Now, the difference could be very slight or it could be very marked, but it's definitely there, and I've experienced the differences as I've travelled around the Hayes world. And the difference is created by the individual leaders and the individual team members in each location. It's not really governed by the corporate definition of culture. Okay, moving on. Now, despite the fact that Canadian professionals don't feel as though they fit, they do recognise its importance to achieving career success. So 86% collectively believe that having a defined fit, i.e. knowing what you're really looking for in an organisation or team to feel at home, is essential to achieving your career goals. Yet the majority of our working population don't feel as they do fit. Right? So we also asked, do you as an individual or professional know what your ideal fit is? And 65% say they either don't or only somewhat do know, with just 34% confidently being able to say yes. Now, if the majority of us don't know what our ideal working fit is, no wonder so many of us are working for organisations or in teams that aren't a fit. We understand we need to fit in to achieve success, but we don't really know what that looks like. So we definitely recognise the importance of fit, but what are we actually doing about it? Well, the answer is that it appears that it's not a huge amount. So 38% of Alberta candidates or employees say that they've accepted a job that they knew they weren't a fit for, and of those, 78% say they no longer work for that organisation. Employers seem to be a little bit worse at this, so 53% of Albertan employees have hired someone they knew wasn't a fit for their team, the company culture, or themselves, compared with 49% nationally, or maybe it's just that Albertan employers are a little bit more honest with themselves. And of those, 74% say that the person that they hired that wasn't a fit no longer works for their organisation. So it clearly doesn't work when you do that. Now, why is this a problem? Well, making the wrong hire definitely costs, and we wanted to find out how much it costs, so we asked. So 30% of employers say that hiring the wrong person, so the time it takes to recruit, onboard, train, etc., costs a business over $50,000. That's 30% say it costs over $50,000. 10% say it costs over $100,000, which I was quite amazed about, but I can certainly imagine, certainly at the C-suite level, senior executive level, it really adds up. 80% of Canada's employers say it costs $10,000 or more. So everybody clearly recognises the cost of getting fit wrong. It's obviously a very significant investment that you're making, and sometimes we're making that investment in people that we know aren't a fit in the first place, right, which doesn't make sense. How else does the wrong fit negatively impact a business? Well, 75% say hiring someone who is the wrong fit decreased morale, 65% said it decreased productivity in the team, and 48% say it increased inefficiency. So basically it just negatively impacts everything and almost definitely has an overall negative impact on retention. So these are very significant things that really can't be ignored at all. So there's clearly something going wrong that's allowing us to make the wrong hiring or career decisions. So to see what's actually going wrong, we've taken a look at how both employers and candidates assess fit. Let's start with employers. So our question to employers is, do you have clarity as to what you mean by fit and what you're looking for? Most people approach hiring with some kind of a plan, though some are definitely more organised than others. We asked employers, when you go to hire someone, what factors have the most weight in terms of importance to your hiring decision? We found that personality fit has the most weight in their hiring decision over things like skills, experience, and educational qualifications. When letting someone go, the results are relatively the same. But you can see personality fit and skills both take a big jump in terms of the amount of weight that they get, and experience and education become less important. I'd say this tells us that we are factoring in fit as we approach staffing decisions. But are we really clear? Well, 88% of employers say they're not likely to hire somebody for their technical experience if they weren't a fit. So in theory, employers are sticking to the plan. However, in actuality, nearly 50% of them say they've done exactly the opposite knowingly. Now, we've established that most hiring managers do try to build fit into their hiring process, even if they ignore it sometimes, but we wondered what employees thought. So we asked employees if they thought that the senior leadership of their organisation have a clearly defined fit, i.e. do they know what type of person would fit into the organisation, and 63% of staff said no, they don't think they do, which is probably a worrying statistic for senior leaders in businesses around Canada. So looking at an employer's assessment one step further, we asked employers about their hiring practices and what actions they undergo to assess fit. Interestingly, 45% don't involve the team in the hiring process, and given the importance of fit with the team interactions should or could be a critical element of assessing fit. If we look at all activities undertaken to assess fit, as you can see here, the majority of us utilize the traditional methods, i.e. reviewing a resume and conducting one or multiple interviews and looking people up online. However, activities such as involving your team, i.e. on a social outing, going for a drink, something like that, doing psychometric testing or in-house assessment centers, so basically activities that take more time or sometimes money are not widely done. However, they're definitely methods that can really help you get to know a person. Let's take a quick look at candidates now. So when a candidate is assessing a job offer, the factors that matter most to their decision are compensation and job description. Fit and company reputation is at the bottom. However, when deciding whether to leave or stay with a company, fit jumps right to the top. So candidates rank compensation as the most important factor when accepting a job, with fit close to the bottom in that decision. But the main reason someone leaves is because of fit. So why don't people do a better job at assessing this at the beginning? Now, the easy and obvious answer would be that they didn't know what it would be like to work there until they actually had, if that makes sense. And that's fair enough, I suppose, until you look at the next stat. So 52% of candidates say they would accept a job knowing that it wasn't a fit if it had the other key elements, such as salary and career progression. If you remember, 37% admit to having actually done exactly that. On the other hand, we need a better way of assessing fit before accepting a job offer. Sorry, on the one hand, we need a better way of assessing fit before accepting a job offer, and on the other, we're kind of our own worst enemies because we're prepared to throw the baby out of the bathwater knowingly at times. So how do candidates assess fit? I'd say there's some pretty standard stuff in here. So most people, based on the interviews they had, on the general impression they have of the interviewers and whether they like them. 50% rely on general word of mouth. And there's a note to employers. A strong company reputation is obviously very important. And a significant portion of candidates do online research. So again, it's vital that organizations have an online brand that promotes themselves as an employer as well as a consumer brand. About 50% also say they try to meet the team or management, but people don't typically approach the interview as a two-way discussion. And I think this is a missed opportunity because using things like behavioral-based questions on your potential future employer could be a great way to see if this manager is someone you can actually work with. In any event, there are lots of things you can do as a candidate to assess fit, but generally we don't seem to do a great job at it. And why is that? Well, to some extent, we feel we're really set up to fail. So when it comes to assessing fit, the recruitment system or process doesn't really allow that much space for it. So let me try to explain what I mean by walking you through a basic recruitment process. So from the candidate's perspective, the process is pretty much set by tradition, from seeing an advert and sending your resume in to prepping for and doing interviews and finally getting the offer. They follow the process, but throughout it, they feel like they're expected to sell themselves at all stages as they want to win the manager or the organization over. I'm not saying that's the wrong way to approach it, but at some stage the mindset needs to flip from get them to like me to do I like them, and I think that rarely happens, or maybe it happens too late in the piece. Then if an offer comes through and it's financially attractive enough, it can be pretty hard to say no. On the employer's side, they agree the shopping list of requirements, which probably includes fit to some degree or other. They screen people in or out based on the requirements. They match the person to the spec in the interview. Perhaps they get someone else to do likewise to interview them as well, and then they compare notes. Then if there's a skills match and an experience match, and basically they didn't dislike the person, then it can be very hard not to make an offer, and it's especially if you don't have any other options, which is a key point. You need choice to make good decisions. Now, the thing to bear in mind is that when you're assessing the skills, experience, and fit, the person you're talking to is in sell myself mode and really has one goal in mind, and that is that they want to get an offer. The question is, where does the assessment of fit actually happen, and how much time is being set aside to try and get it right? I think this is more poignant for the candidate because of the balance of power, but it's very important for the hiring manager too. Okay, so we've shown that people genuinely do deem fit as important, but the assessment is flawed. And as a result, we wanted to look at the factors of fit and sort of drill down a layer or so. So we took the four elements and ask both employers and candidates or employees, when you're hiring, letting someone go, accepting a job or leaving a job, to weight the 4 factors of fit to the importance to their decision. So let's start with employers. When they're hiring, they give work ethic match a 30% weighting, and down at the bottom you have social behaviour that gets a 22% weighting. When they're letting somebody go, it's very similar. So work ethic match gets a 31% weighting, team versus individual and conformity flip, and social behaviour is still down there at the bottom. From a candidate's perspective, when you're accepting a job offer, work ethic match also gets the highest weighting, with social behaviour again at the bottom. And when they're leaving a job, again, work ethic is at the top with social behaviour at the bottom. So I think all that makes sense. To summarise it, all of the parties weight work ethic match as the most important factor, followed by conformity, then team versus independence, with social behaviour last. So this tells me that both candidates and employers are aligned. We're all clear on what's the most important thing in the workplace, and the most important thing in the workplace seems to be work. So maybe we just need to be better at assessing work ethic. However, maybe not. We asked both parties, when things go wrong, which factor of fit was the root cause? And 38.8% of employers said the social behaviour was the #1 reason for letting someone go, with 34% saying it was work ethic, and 41% admit that they wrongly assessed the social behaviour match. On the employee side, 46% also rank social behaviour as the #1 reason for leaving a job, whilst only 21% said it was a work ethic match, and 34% said they also wrongly assessed the social behaviour match. So it's very interesting stuff, and it leads me to a big question here, which is, are we really overvaluing professionalism and work ethic at work? We say that work ethic is the most important aspect to our decision when evaluating fit, but when push comes to shove, it's social behaviour that causes the fit to go right or to go wrong. So why aren't we doing a better job or putting more time into assessing the social side to work? Okay, going one step further, we took a look at professionals' expectations of working style compared to employers' expectations. Now in our survey, we asked our people to rate their own expectations as employers and employees on the 4 fit elements in the same way I did for myself earlier. We did this to see if there are any gaps that could shed a bit of a light on the fit conundrum and to help people understand it a bit better. I should say that because the sample size was so large, so 2,500 people, we expected that everything would kind of average itself out and we'd end up with very close matches between employers and candidates, and to some extent that's really what we got. But for that reason, we believe that even a small gap could indicate a potential issue for employers or employees in general. So I'll start with work ethic. So employers rate work ethic match at 6.99, meaning they expect people to work pretty hard, but it's not a sweatshop per se. Employees were slightly higher at 7.17. That's not surprising. People know what working hard means pretty much. Whether there's actually a match between you and your specific employee or employer or not is another thing, and this really is a question for you to work out, I think. On conformity, there's a significant gap, which is really interesting. So employers say they're expecting a 6, whereas employees are expecting a 6.88. And what does that mean? Well, my interpretation is that lots of people would really prefer clearer direction from their boss. I, for one, get very frustrated when I'm asked to do something with no instruction on how, then come up with a plan and get halfway through only to be told I'm not doing it the right way. I think that line managers can sometimes confuse empowerment with a lack of direction. You think you're empowering someone but you're really confusing them by not giving clear directions. People actually want clear direction, and once they have it, they want to be empowered to make it happen. Now, if we look at social behaviour, we see the results show that expectations from the employer and employee are very similar, which is a bit strange given what we learned on the previous slides. If social behaviour, as we've now learned, is the root cause for things going wrong, why should it be such a good match? Maybe employees want a more casual environment than they're actually saying, or employers are leaning towards a more formal environment because they think that's what they should do versus what is actually best for their team and retention. So it's food for thought. Certainly made me think about whether the social environment I've created is having a positive effect on our productivity, retention, and team success, and whether I can foster an environment that's more suited to people's natural style and will enhance results. Looking at team versus individual, this is the most aligned across all fit factors, but remember, this is an average of 2,500 people, and the question for you is, does your requirement of team versus individual match the reality of what you really want, and does this match with the person or the people that you've been hiring or that you're looking to hire? Now, having said all that, I have another view on these matches, and that is that maybe even just the smallest misalignment in fit is actually a major problem, especially if there's a lot of them added together. And I think the phrase death from 1,000 cuts has over the years been used time and time again in terms of employer-employee fit, and maybe it's a way bigger issue than people might think. Now, that's really the bulk of the content for today's presentation. I'm going to leave you with a few recommendations, and I'll start with recommendations for employers. So define your fit. Without this, you can't effectively assess and therefore recruit. De-weight the technical requirements by broadening the job spec. Prioritize social behavior to ensure a better match. Cover all the bases, so psychometric testing, searching online, and behavioral-based questions can help paint the full picture of a candidate. And be prepared for your interviews, and knowing what you want to learn in advance will help you get the most out of the interview and make sure you're assessing fit effectively. And then finally, involve your teams. I think they're the personification of the ideal fit, and as I said before, a candidate, a future employee will probably tell people things to your team that they may not say to you as they're trying to win you over to offer them a job. And then recommendations for employees or candidates. Define your ideal fit first and know what you want from your manager, colleagues, and office culture so that you have the potential to measure it. Remember that interviewing is a two-way street. During the interview or interviews, ask about the office culture, their working style as a manager and of the team. Make it real. Ask to meet the team and or spend time in the office. It's a perfectly reasonable request, in my opinion. And look beyond salary and job description. The grass isn't always greener, so don't undervalue the importance of fit. If you feel that you fit in at your current organisation, then that's actually probably worth a significantly large amount to you. And that's really everything I have for you today. Thank you very much for listening to what I had to say and for paying attention. We do have time for questions. As Caitlin said at the beginning, if you have any questions, there's a chat box at the top of your screen, so please type away and send them through. Whilst we're waiting for that to happen, I can say that the second instalment of our FIT series is coming out, I think, in late September or early October, so that'll be on its way. If you want to get a copy of Report 1, it's available right now on our website. You can download it at hayes.ca/fit, or you can email me directly at jim.fearon@hayes.com, and I can make sure that a copy gets delivered out to you if you'd like a hard copy of it. So thank you once more, and let's see if there's any questions. Which it appears there are a few. So question 1, it's fine to say factor in these elements of fit in the decision-making process, but in your opinion, isn't it true you won't really know someone fits or doesn't fit until they are in the job? Yes, I think that's potentially very true, and a good question, and I think you could also argue that the same goes the other way for a candidate, like the proof is always going to be in the pudding. What I would say is that the vast majority of the time, and I would call myself guilty of this, we go through the interview process without even giving ourselves a real chance of measuring fit. And I'd say that I've made a whole bunch of hiring decisions in the past, largely based on, well, do I think the person's technically competent enough? And that's easier to gauge, but a gut instinct on whether I think they're going to fit in. And there are times, definitely times, where I've looked back on people I've hired and said, my gut instinct was that they weren't going to they weren't going to work out. And had I actually had a formal process to say, to measure that, I think I probably would have leaned the other way of not hiring them and giving them a crack, and probably saved myself a lot of pain and a lot of difficulty and a lot of money in the process, and I could have moved on to try and hire somebody else. I think actually what we do is we accept the proof in the pudding as being part of the hiring process, rather than trying to eliminate some of those people that might squeeze through that otherwise you wouldn't want to hire. So I hope that answers the question. And there's definitely one other question here. So what have we got? Oh, there's 3 questions. Do you have any research showing a correlation between higher fit values and better retention at organisations? Do you have any research showing correlation between higher fit values and better retention at organisations? I would have to say that I'm not 100% sure about that. I'd ask maybe Caitlin if she could step in and give us that. I would think that we probably do, based on the research that we've done. But Caitlin,
Hi, Jim.
Are you able
Yes.
to answer that?
Yeah, absolutely. So part of our second FIT report, which is coming out in October this year, is looking at the correlation between fit and retention. So the answer is a huge yes. There's a big correlation between better fit and retention. And the middle step to that is actually a combination of 2 things. One is happiness. So people who feel like they fit in their job are happier in their jobs. And then the second piece of that is actually knowing what your fit is. So as you've already talked about, a lot of people and a lot of organizations don't have that ideal fit really clear and set, and then when they're job hunting from the candidate side, they're not always prioritizing fit. And so when people are actually prioritizing fit, they know what fit looks like, they're making a different kind of decision to accept a job or to move within an organization based on fit. And so that's correlating with retention, because they're making a better decision in the first place for themselves, not just immediately I need a job, but also looking ahead to what are the most important things for me in a job.
Right, fair enough. Good answer. So you can find out more about that when the second FIT report comes out.
Yeah, absolutely.
Excellent. Well, that's those are the other two questions we have at the moment. We can just wait a little bit longer to see if any others come through. But Aaron, is there anything that you wanted to add or close off with at all?
No, I just found it great. I think the report is fantastic, and just putting in action today on the webinar has been phenomenal. We've definitely gone through some periods of fairly high turnover, and have made a pretty big effort to do our kind of piece of fit, which is really focusing on our values. And I think what we've kind of come to with our values is really can kind of be put together in the same way the 4 kind of axes you guys have decided on in terms of defining fit. And I just really view it as the same way you do procurement. Hiring is kind of a certain type of procurement, and if you were evaluating any kind of tool, you would have a really well-defined process for figuring out what you want. And I think sometimes in HR and in recruiting, we get kind of blinded by a bunch of factors, and I see the biggest value to that first question that was asked was just that by actually being thoughtful about it and writing it down and having a conversation and getting even the candidates to think about where they fall on those spectrums is just, there's so much value to not to be consistent with your hiring processes. And yeah, this was fantastic.
Brilliant. Okay, thanks. Well, I think that's it. We're going to wrap up now. We've got no further questions. So thank you very much for the opportunity to present, Aaron. We greatly appreciate it, and hopefully people found it useful.
Our pleasure, and I think we'll have a survey coming out here shortly to get some feedback from you folks to make sure you found it valuable, and if you'd like to see more of this from the Calgary Chamber of Commerce.
Thank you very much.